Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rowena Irani. On October 3rd, 2016, Rowena failed to show up to pick up her mother from work, which was highly unusual. Concerned when they were unable to reach her by phone, her mother decided to get a ride home from a co-worker. Upon arriving, she found Rowena lying on the floor, bleeding profusely. She immediately contacted emergency services, and Rowena was rushed to the hospital, but tragically, she passed away the following day. During the investigation, your brother was brought in for questioning and directed them to a possible suspect who had shown red flags throughout this tragic case. Rowena Irani was born on February 18, 1994, in Karachi, Pakistan, to Tehran and Beham Irani. In 2004, when Rowena was 10 years old, the family moved to Wichita, Kansas, seeking better opportunities. The aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy cast a shadow of prejudice on the Irani family, and Rowena and her older brother, Rushad, faced challenges in making friends due to this hostility. Despite the initial difficulties, they gradually found their place and expanded their social circles. Rowena thrived and blossomed into a determined, sociable, and compassionate young woman. She graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 2012 and immediately enrolled at Wichita State University, pursuing a psychology degree with the aspiration of obtaining a master's degree and becoming a counselor for teenagers. Rowena worked at the Wichita Children's Home, a facility that provided refuge for neglected, abused, and emotionally distressed youth. She formed deep connections with the children under her care and demonstrated her remarkable ability to empathize with and support them. In May 2016, Rowena reconnected with an old family friend, a man named Danne Owens, who had enlisted in the U.S. Army after finishing high school, but had his military service abruptly halted due to a severe traumatic brain injury. Rowena and Danne quickly formed a romantic connection, but concerning behaviors soon emerged regarding Danne's possessive tendencies, controlling attitude, and explosive anger issues. Despite Rowena's reservations, Danne became fixated on the idea of marrying her and starting a family right away, even though Rowena, at 22, expressed her desire to focus on completing her college education before considering such a serious commitment. Danne's insistence on marriage and his intensity alarmed Rowena, making her feel the relationship was progressing too rapidly. When Rowena asked for some space early on in the relationship, Danne responded with a deeply unsettling and desperate letter, pleading for her not to leave him, professing his inability to live without her, and disturbingly hinting at self-harm. Rowena broke up with Danne first because she wasn't ready for marriage and starting a family. After she told him this in person, he seemed to understand and give her some space. However, just a week later, he started pressuring her again about getting engaged, planning the wedding, and future family plans. His actions made it seem like he saw Rowena more as a conquest and fantasy rather than an equal partner. He was trying to limit her to just a domestic role instead of supporting her education and career. This imbalance in their relationship worried Rowena and made her question their compatibility. In September 2016, Danne's aggression had become so severe that Rowena felt the need to share her concerns with her brother, Rushad, who was a police officer. Rowena told Rushad about troubling incidents involving Danne, including his accounts of brutal killings he said he had committed during his military service, even bragging about killing women and children in Afghanistan. These shocking revelations deeply troubled Rowena. Additionally, Danne revealed his plans to kill an ex-girlfriend who had broken up with him, admitting he was vengeful and unstable after the breakup, seriously considering her murder. Rushad agreed with Rowena that Danne was a real threat and warned that he seemed capable of carrying out violent acts against her. On September 23rd, Rowena decided to end her relationship with Danne and cut off all communication with him due to his emotionally abusive behavior and concerning actions. Danne's response to this was to plan revenge instead of respecting Rowena's decision. After undergoing shoulder surgery and being unable to handle a firearm properly due to his recovery, Dan, driven by anger, bought a .45 caliber handgun. Subsequently, on October 3rd, more than a week after their breakup, Dan secretly showed up at Rowena's house while her family was out. Security cameras caught Danny parking his car away from the Irani family residence before sneakily approaching in broad daylight, his arm in a sling to hide the illegal gun he was carrying. He entered through an unlocked door and waited for Rowena to show up. When the 22-year-old unsuspectingly entered the room, he aimed and shot her in the head without warning. This ruthless, violent act against someone he claimed to deeply care for was not a crime of passion, but a cold and calculated murder by an obsessively controlling abuser. After Rowena was shot in a cold-blooded manner, Danny quickly left the scene through the back door of the house and drove away in a hurry to avoid getting caught. On his way, he stopped at different ponds across Wichita to dispose of crucial evidence, such as the handgun magazine and Rowena's cell phone, both of which he had taken in an attempt to hide his actions. Meanwhile, Rowena was left alone, suffering from serious injuries and bleeding heavily in her home until around 4 p.m. When Rowena's mother returned home after being dropped off, she was confused by her daughter not being there to pick her up. As she usually did, unable to reach Rowena on the phone, she got a ride from a coworker to their family home. Upon arrival, she was met with a horrifying scene. Rowena was lying motionless on the floor in a pool of blood, with a severe head injury. Frantically, Rowena's mother called emergency services, but it was too late. Rowena's condition was critical due to the gunshot wound and significant blood loss. Rowena fought for her life at Wesley Medical Center for nearly 24 hours, while her family held on to hope, waiting for a miracle. Sadly, death took her on October 4th at the young age of 22. A promising life, taken by a senseless act of violence. Rowena's family, despite their deep sorrow, were determined to seek justice for her murder. They quickly urged investigators to concentrate on Danne Owens, Rowena's former boyfriend who had caused her fear. Danny was promptly found and questioned. After being arrested and taken to the police station, Danny admitted to holding a grudge against Rowena for breaking up with him. Despite trying to explain that Rowena's death was accidental during intense questioning, evidence proved his claim to be false. In his account to investigators, Danny explained that he spontaneously visited Rowena's residence with the intention of discussing the possibility of reconciling their relationship, hoping to achieve closure. He admitted to arriving unannounced while carrying a loaded .45 caliber pistol, though he claimed the firearm was concealed within his arm sling and that he never had any explicit intention of threatening or harming Rowena. Danny asserted that Rowena suddenly surprised him by turning a corner, causing him to reflexively flinch due to his PTSD from military service. In this panicked moment, he alleged that he accidentally discharged a round in her direction, tragically striking Rowena in the head and causing her to collapse lifeless to the ground. Overwhelmed by panic, he fled the scene and later disposed of the evidence. The detectives dismissed his claim that the shooting was accidental and instead believed it was a carefully planned murder carried out by a vengeful ex-partner. This belief was based on evidence such as security footage, his admission of sneaking up on Rowena with a loaded gun, the attempt to get rid of evidence, and the gunshot wound to the victim's head. In November 2018, Danne Owens went to trial for the brutal murder of Rowena in Wichita. The prosecution presented a strong case with plenty of evidence, both direct and circumstantial, leaving no doubt. They created a story that portrayed Danny as possessive and controlling, leading to violence when he couldn't handle rejection in his fantasies, which tragically resulted in Rowena's death. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Danny guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated burglary. He was sentenced to life in prison in Kansas for his heartless act of ending Rowena's life out of wounded pride. Danny will not be able to seek parole for 25 years. and it is unlikely he will be released considering the brutality of his crimes. According to official court documents, he is presently confined to a prison cell at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. Reflecting on the tragic story of Rowena Irani, we are faced with the harsh reality of domestic violence and its destructive outcomes. Rowena's life was ended by someone she once cared for deeply, showing us how vital it is to notice warning signs and seek help in abusive relationships. It is crucial that we come together to help victims of domestic abuse and ensure that abusers are held accountable for their actions. Let Rowena's story remind us that love should never be mixed with fear or violence. May her memory motivate us to foster positive, respectful relationships and work towards a world where everyone feels secure and appreciated. It is sad and unfortunate what this monster did to Rowena. She lost her life at a young age with so much ahead of her. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victim whose life was tragically cut short and the loved ones she left behind.
One such controversial case was the crime that occurred in the Mullenix family. Let's try to make sense of it together. Let's find out the reasons for the tension and weigh the responsibility of each person involved. Could it be that the victim is far from innocent? Or is her executioner a wolf in sheep's clothing? An unexpected discovery. On September 14, 2006, Newport Beach was troubled. A woman's body was discovered in a body of water. Apparently, the corpse had been wrapped in a sheet and then placed in a box. When exposed to the water, the unreliable wrapping fell apart and exposed what should have been hidden from view. The body floated to the surface after being in the water for no more than a day. Normally, warm water would speed up the decomposition process. Therefore, the appearance of the dead left much to be desired. Forensic medical examination established the cause of the woman's death was multiple stab wounds. In total, she received about 52 blows, one of which came directly to the eye. Specialists agreed that the injuries were caused by 3 different knives, which means there were at least 2 people who attacked the victim. Naturally, the victim had no identification on her, so the police had to work hard to find out her identity. Among the missing, the profile of the woman was not listed, and no new disappearances have been reported so far. Everything pointed to attempts to cover up the crime committed. Experts also determined that the woman had resorted to plastic surgery during her lifetime. She had breast augmentation. Since the identification of bodies by serial number of implants became a routine procedure, the identity of the murdered was soon established. She was 56-year-old Barbara Mullenix. Who is Barbara Mullenix? The future Mrs. Mullenix was born on May 29, 1950 in Munich, Germany. In her youth, she was very beautiful and sociable. Therefore, she was always in the center of attention. However, these qualities brought her not only success with the opposite sex, but also caused her a lot of trouble. At the age of 18, she was subjected to violence. The girl wanted to forget as quickly as possible what happened. But after a while, she learned about the pregnancy. To make an abortion, Barbara did not become, she decided to bear the child and give it to a good family. After a while, she got married. In the marriage, she gave birth to a son, Alex Hagwood. However, the marital relationship with her first husband did not last long. At the age of 35, Barbara's attention was attracted by Bruce Mullenix. The man recalled that she was a special woman and immediately liked him. She was characterized by straightforwardness and self-confidence. In November 1987, the couple married. Mr. Mullenix was younger than his wife for 9 years, but it was not particularly felt. Barbara knew how to arouse interest and liked to have fun. After moving to Oklahoma City, a daughter, Rachel, was born to the family. Everything was fine at first, but as time went on, problems began. In the evenings, Bruce could skip on a mug of beer and on weekends to drop in on friends. Barbara at first supported the company, but later became addicted to alcohol. Apparently, the events that occurred in her youth left their imprint. Under the influence of alcohol, the woman, despite the parents' relationship with each other, they loved their daughter very much. They spoiled her and tried to please her in every way. While living in Oklahoma, before the divorce, Rachel had a large room while her father and mother lived in a small one. On the occasion of the girls' birthday parties were always held in the house. Miss Mullenix recalled that she was very close to her mother, even more so than most mothers and daughters. But such a close bond existed only when the woman was sober. The rest of the time, Rachel tried to stay away from her, made no attempt to even talk to her. Our relationship was generally good, but when Barbara drank, she got angry and crazy. She was the first one to get into a fight. Bruce confirmed what his daughter said. Since the house Mullenixoff was located near Hollywood, Barbara was in an extraordinary delight. She loved movies, especially singled out Gone with the Wind. A short time after the move, the woman managed to get a job as an extra. Hollywood dream come true. She felt that in time she would be offered a more serious role. But for now, together with her daughter, took an active part in the masses in movies and TV shows. The scene of the crime was established. Who is the culprit? Police officers could not understand why none of the relatives did not report the disappearance of the murdered woman. Soon, police officers Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright obtained a search warrant for Barbara's home. They hypothesized that since the woman was wrapped in a sheet, the crime could have occurred in bed. So the search for evidence had to begin at Mrs. Mullenix's residence. The police found no one at Barbara's house. At first glance, everything seemed to be in order. There were no visible signs of a crime. However, in one of the rooms on the second floor, a disassembled bed attracted attention. It was without a mattress. It only took a couple hours to reconstruct the scene. The detectives' assumptions had a real basis. Specialists found traces of blood on the walls. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to get rid of the evidence. The blood-stained mattress had apparently been destroyed. There was no doubt that the crime had taken place in this place. The police also believed that the owner of the house knew the perpetrator. Therefore, the first suspect was Mr. Mullenix. It was a strange coincidence that the man was out of town. In addition, just the day after the body was discovered, Bruce returned home. He explained that he was worried because his wife and daughter were not answering their phone calls. The man, of course, had a premonition of something wrong, but in no way expected to hear such a thing. Nevertheless, the news of Barbara's terrible death, the former spouse took it calmly. This also alerted the detectives, so they began to investigate the reason for his departure. Bruce said he was on a business trip. Mr. Mullenix's management confirmed his alibi. The investigation was back to square one. Daughter's love. When Rachel turned 17 years old, she met with Ian Allen. The guy was older than the girl by 4 years. Young people fell madly in love with each other. Ian supported Rachel in everything, even helped with household chores. At first, Barbara liked him. They even spent time together. They went for walks together. They went out together. In order for the lovers to meet freely, Rachel's parents got a special permit. Apparently, so required by law and police officers. Law enforcers often drew attention to the non-standard couple. The girl was allowed to be absent until 1 o'clock in the morning, but she often violated the established schedule, for which she was repeatedly under house arrest. After a while, Mrs. Mullenix noticed that her daughter's feelings were growing into something more. To make matters worse, the two announced that they had decided to get engaged. The move seemed too quick to Barbara. Ian and Rachel had only known each other for 3 months. Barbara didn't want to lose her daughter and the payments she received from her ex-husband. Barbara decided to increase her influence and discipline. Rachel was caught between two fires. She didn't want to offend her mother, whose control was only increasing. Ian, in turn, did not give way. So her mother and Ian began to compete for Rachel's attention. Rachel's fragile psyche suffered with every quarrel and altercation that arose between them. By the end of the summer of 2006, Ian and Barbara's relationship finally deteriorated. The younger Alan was afraid that Rachel's mother would convince her not to date him or forbid her from doing so at all. One day, when Rachel once again violated her schedule for coming home, Barbara exploded. Despite the late hour, Mrs. Mullenix headed to the boyfriend's house and made a scandal. This situation really offended and angered Ian. It became clear to everyone that it couldn't go on like this. On the trail of the fugitives, Bruce was no longer suspected of killing his ex-wife. Detectives turned their attention to Rachel and Ian. Police found out that Barbara had been feeling lonely lately and was drinking a lot. It made her inadequate. Her daughter's attention was slipping away from her. She considered Ian an unworthy companion and Rachel a traitor. That's why Mrs. Mullenix often quarreled with them. Besides, no one knew where the lovers were. They never contacted each other. Given the complicated relationship between Barbara and Ian, the girl's father assumed that Ian was a criminal who was being sought. Rachel, in all likelihood, is not safe either. Otherwise, she would have made herself known, Mr. Mullenix pondered. The police began searching for the missing persons. The Allens' house was also searched. When the detectives checked Ian's computer, they found curious queries on the internet. The guy was researching the route of transportation to the city of Tampa, which is located in Florida. Bruce remembered that before moving in with him, Barbara and Rachel lived there. The couple was reported missing. All police stations in the country received bulletins with a description of the appearance of young people. In addition, the alleged suspect did not disappear without a trace. He left a decent trail behind him. Ian Allen's credit card was used to make a purchase at a gas station in Louisiana. That's also where a surveillance camera captured the guy's truck. Mr. Mullenix's fears were confirmed. Rachel was indeed with him. The only thing left to do was to intercept them. So officers Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright called their colleagues from the next town on the couple's route. Local police shut down highways in search of the van. Ian Allen and Rachel Mullenix were soon caught. The kidnapping story. "Do you know I've been kidnapped?" Rachel shouted when apprehended. "What right did you have to arrest me, to throw me on the ground in handcuffs?" She continued, "I'm not a criminal for you to treat me like this." Detectives Joe and Steve waited for the moment when they could finally question the couple. 2 days later, they arrived at a Louisiana police station. Miss Mullenix insisted that she had not killed her mother. Once investigators pressed the girl, she blamed it on her boyfriend. Rachel claimed that Ian killed her mom and afterwards forced her to run away with him. The police asked for more details about what happened on September 13th, 2006. "I woke up to hear noises in the house. Then I realized that my mother was screaming a lot and calling for help. I rushed to her room. What I saw shocked me. Ian had attacked my mom with a knife. He was stabbing her over and over again. I jumped on him, tried to push him away. He was very strong, so he easily fought me back. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was in a kind of stupor." Rachel began her story. Afterwards, she added that the boyfriend forced her to help cover her tracks. He also insisted that she pack her mother's belongings into bags. Rachel claimed that by doing so, Ian wanted to stage Barbara's unexpected departure. At first, the detectives wanted to believe the girl. The shock she'd been through could send anyone into a state of frustration. But for some reason, the witness to the crime was overly justified. And afterwards, she fiercely insisted that she was not involved in the crime. Furthermore, there were no signs of resistance on Rachel's body. When communicating with Ian Allen, police officers found out an interesting fact. His girlfriend from time to time told about how hard it is for her to live with her mother, how intemperate the woman behaves when she drinks. Instead of reconciling the rivals, Rachel only increased Ian's negative feelings. Certainly some of the facts were true, but some of them were clearly exaggerated. That was why Ian was finally convinced that Barbara would not let them rest. Sometime after the night's quarrel at the Allen house, holding a grudge against Barbara, the lad headed for the Mullenix house. Rachel was under house arrest. I wanted to see her. I knew Barbara wouldn't let me in to see her, so I came secretly. I wanted to sneak into her room quietly, but Barbara spotted me. We got into an argument that escalated into threats. With the folding knife I always carry, I decided to scare her. As soon as the blade was at Mrs. Mullenix's throat, she started screaming. This made me angry and provoked an attack. Things got out of control. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Rachel really had nothing to do with it, Ian said about the incident. To the surprise of the investigators, the guy did not try to avoid responsibility and confessed to everything. Over time, detectives became increasingly convinced that Rachel Mullenix was directly involved in the crime. Her boyfriend was clearly covering for her. CCTV footage from the gas station convenience store where the couple had stopped was scrutinized. Rachel was walking around the store looking for groceries. At that point, she could have safely called for help or run away. But for some reason, she didn't. Moreover, as it turned out later, the girl had the opportunity to call her father, but preferred to make a call to her friend. It was found that a couple of hours after the crime, Miss Mullenix sent a message to Ian Allen. "I love you," she wrote in her text. And that's how Rachel finally lost the trust of the investigation. Rachel's defense. It took 2 years to gather and analyze all the evidence in the Barbara Mullenix murder case. During that time, Rachel turned 19 years old. For any other girl, that's a great age. There is a whole life ahead of her. For young Mullenix, her future depended on the jury's verdict, and she tried to convince everyone of her innocence. When Rachel talked about her childhood, her face lit up. It was obvious that the tender years were happily spent. No doubt Barbara and Bruce had tried to make them so, despite many circumstances. Recalling their relationship with her mother, the daughter said that they were good. They were marred only by alcohol, which was abused by the murdered woman and the boyfriend who appeared over time. At school, I was known as a girl from a not very prosperous family with alcoholic parents. When my father drank, he was still himself. He was kind and considerate, which can't be said for my mom. She described the family atmosphere in court. Her words were confirmed by her friend Kelsey Douglas, who often visited the Mullenix family. Kelsey said that Rachel always tried to please her mother in everything, but apparently there came a point when she could no longer tolerate the harsh control and insults. She admitted to me that she had started drinking from time to time. Rachel didn't know what else to do. She had nowhere else to turn. The alcohol helped relieve tension, to forget for a while about family difficulties, Miss Douglas reported. Alex, Rachel's older brother, strangely enough, also stood up for Rachel. He considered her a victim rather than a murderer. That's why he refused to believe in her guilt to the last. He told the court that his sister had been a good and obedient child. She did well at school, practiced sports and ballet. As for the relationship between Barbara, Rachel, and Ian, Alex noted that at first they were great. All three spent a lot of time together. Barbara's eldest son also reported that their mother abused alcohol and illegal substances before her death. She took stimulants and tranquilizers and often threw loud parties. When Barbara realized that Rachel and her boyfriend wanted to distance themselves, she couldn't accept it. In addition, she found it difficult to get by on her own without alimony and maintenance money. All of this became a source of irritation. According to Alex, Mrs. Mullenix was a very controlling woman. She wanted to be in control of everything. With Rachel, she certainly went overboard in this. My mother loved to be the center of attention. With Ian coming into Rachel's life, her position shifted to the side, Alex summarized. In the involvement of his daughter in the murder of Barbara could not believe and the girl's father. He believed that she loved her mother very much and was incapable of hurting her. In all the time, Rachel did not accuse her mother of the weaknesses that were peculiar to her. She simply reported them as a fact. The girl repeatedly stated that she felt sorry for her. Barbara had a difficult life. About the relationship of her parents, Miss Mullenix recalled with bitterness. Rachel said that the slightest details in the behavior of his father drove his mother into a rage. Barbara often snapped at him, considered a spender. Rachel also told the court that she regretted her love for the young man. She made a big mistake when she started dating him. Their feelings brought discord to her relationship with her mother. Ian felt that my mom was a threat to him. He also wanted to control me like she did. My boyfriend wasn't ideal either. Often hurt and treated me like I was his property. I was torn between the two. Every time there was an argument with my mom, I shared about it. It made it easier for me to get over what happened, Rachel recalled. She concluded by adding that Ian did everything he could to prevent harm to what he thought was his prosecution's position. Sonia Belest, the prosecutor involved in the case, did not believe Rachel's story. She claimed that the girl's angelic appearance was deceptive because she thought she was already smart enough for her age. Therefore, the position Miss Mullenix had chosen was thoroughly refuted. The officers who investigated supported the prosecutor in this. Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright believed that Rachel had some mental health issues. According to them, she was the meanest girl they had ever spoken to. During the interview, the prosecutor competently appealed the inconsistencies in Miss Mullenix's testimony. She inquired of Rachel why she never once called for help when she could have done so, to which the girl replied that she was confused and did not know how to behave in such a situation. The defendant also added that she was frightened by Ian's behavior, which was difficult to predict. The prosecutor drew attention to the fact that Rachel had not a single chance to escape. The girl's actions were atypical for a kidnapped victim. The prosecution believed that Miss Mullenix had not only attacked her mother herself, but had planned the crime in advance. When they tried to ask Rachel about the details of Ian's stabbing, Rachel was unable to answer. Her testimony changed and contradicted each other more than once. During the trial, the defendant stated that she was not present during the argument between Barbara and Ian. Allegedly, she simply left them in her room, hoping they would calm down. Only then did she hear screaming and the sounds of a struggle, after which she came running back and saw that the guy attacked her mom with a knife. However, Rachel's version did not coincide with the evidence that was found at the scene of the crime. The forensic report clearly established that Barbara's attacker was not alone. Specialists estimated that 5 minutes had been enough to kill the woman. Rachel continued to insist on her own innocence. Questions: why she didn't call emergency services, why she wrote a love text to the killer boyfriend, were frozen in the air unanswered. The forensic psychiatrist who worked with Miss Mullenix diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder. He believed she truly loved her mother, but she hated her equally as much. By the way, people with this kind of personality are prone to erratic behavior. It's often destructive to both the unsub and others. Bitter verdict. It took the jury 3 days to reach a final verdict. Ian Allen was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. For Rachel Mullenix, the court's verdict was no consolation either. She was found to be involved in the death of her mother and qualified the act as first-degree murder. The girl was sentenced to life in prison. Her first chance for parole will come when the inmate turns about 41 years old. After the verdict was announced, the prosecutor said she was relieved. There is no question that Ian Allen and Rachel Mullenix killed Barbara, Sonia Balest concluded. For a mother, such a death was a true betrayal. The day Barbara brought her daughter into the world, she signed her own death warrant. The child she loved immensely became her light and darkness at the same time. Undoubtedly, Mrs. Mullenix made many mistakes in her life. She was not an ideal mother, but she never abandoned her children to perdition. Barbara's jealousy and fear of being alone hardened the woman's already strong character. But people in love always had a choice. They could simply leave to preserve their right to their feelings. In time, things would have calmed down. Relationships would have mended. Perhaps Barbara would have switched to something else. And the grandchildren Rachel and Ian would give her would be her outlet. Massive surge going on right now at the New Hampshire home where a missing little girl's father and stepmother used to live. Harvey Montgomery vanished while in her father's custody years ago at the age of 5. Investigators may have a new lead in the Harmony Montgomery chase 3 years after the little girl was last seen. The FBI's here, so there's something or something, yeah. Hey, fans, it's gotta be the I can't do something I'm sitting on again. In December 2021, the name Harmony Montgomery first hit headlines across the United States of America when a missing persons investigation was launched to find the 7-year-old girl. Since then, her father and stepmother have both been arrested and charged. A home where she used to live in Manchester, New Hampshire, has been searched for days on end, and the reward for information leading to her discovery has topped $140,000. But here's the strange thing. Before all of this, nobody seems to have set eyes on Harmony for more than 2 years. So, who is Harmony Montgomery? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice that this little girl has gone missing? Where has she been at all this time? And is it now too late to save her life? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I want to take you guys through the story of little Harmony Montgomery, who dropped off the face of the earth back in 2019. Little Harmony wasn't born under a lucky star. Both her parents have a problematic history of substance abuse, and she had to cope with a visual disability in one eye through all of that. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, a resident of Massachusetts, lost custody due to addiction problems when her daughter was just about 4 years old. Sorey had to surrender Harmony to the state in the summer of 2018. After that, the girl's father, Adam Montgomery, secured sole custody in February 2019 and moved her to New Hampshire. Harmony was living with her father, Adam, as well as his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their children at the property at the time when she went missing. The little girl had been in and out of foster care for much of her life, according to her files. Sometimes kids do get caught up in the legal system for years at a time. But Harmony wasn't one of the kids who slipped through the cracks of the foster care system. She went missing from her own father's house, and he never reported the matter, nor tried to reach out for help, nor find his daughter. So what exactly is his involvement in the disappearance of his child? Police said they first became aware of the case when they received a call from the girl's mother, Crystal Sorey, in November 2021. She had been trying to locate her daughter for months, but said she had been blocked by her ex-husband from contacting her. She said she last saw her daughter during a FaceTime video call with Adam Montgomery around Easter 2019. Sorey told the police that since then, she unsuccessfully made attempts to find Harmony by contacting various schools and driving by addresses associated with Adam Montgomery. She said last year, he and his partner Kayla blocked all communication with her. According to news reports, Sorey had been sharing concerns over Harmony's well-being with Blair and Jonathan Miller, a couple who fostered and eventually adopted Harmony's younger brother Jameson in June 2019. The two were also actively trying to make a connection with Harmony and told Sorey multiple times they'd adopt her if the need arose. Harmony spent a lot of time in foster care with her younger biological brother Jameson. It seems that the couple, who said they repeatedly told Harmony's mother that they were willing to adopt the girl if need be, was very much interested in the hunt or the missing child. The couple actively tried to make contact with Harmony throughout the past 2 years, as they said Jameson missed her and that he'd cry at night for her. The couple said they weren't ever able to speak with Harmony and kept in touch with Sorey about her attempts to open a line of communication with the girl's father. On November 18, 2021, Sorey reported Harmony missing to the Manchester Police Department. Sorey made her first public appearance at the Candlelight Vigil on January 8th after authorities searched the last known residence of her daughter. "I just don't feel that in my heart," Sorey told reporters at the time. "Like, I don't feel like I lost her. And a mother knows. A mother knows if your baby's here or not. I know she's here." She had had this message for her daughter. "Hi, baby. If you can see me and hear me, I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you, and I won't stop fighting until I find you, okay? You stay strong, and Mommy's right here fighting for you. I love you." Now, this is where the timeline of events starts to get confusing, and that's typically the point in any investigation when you know someone has been lying. Mrs. Sorey told police she had not been able to contact her daughter since they spoke on a video call in April 2019. After that, she said, Montgomery cut off all contact between her and her daughter. But Montgomery claimed to investigators he last saw his daughter around Thanksgiving 2019, claiming that Mrs. Sorey had picked up her from Manchester to take her to live with her. The criminal complaint says that Montgomery claimed to believe his daughter was living with his ex and did not show much emotion or reaction when officers said they were concerned whether Harmony was alive when they contacted him in December. His story was also contradicted by Kayla Montgomery's account, who said she last saw Harmony the day after Thanksgiving, when her husband said he was driving her to see Mrs. Sorey. And in some additional testimony, Adam Montgomery's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, told investigators that he had not seen Harmony or his nephew since late 2019, when she was 5 years old. Police interviews with other family members revealed Montgomery was allegedly abusive toward his daughter. including giving her a black eye, forcing her to clean the toilet with her toothbrush, and making her stand in a corner for hours as punishment. Montgomery's brother Michael Montgomery told investigators he had concerns that Adam was physically abusive to the child and was super short with her. Kevin Montgomery said he noticed Harmony had a black eye in July 2019, which his nephew confessed to causing by hitting her in the face, according to the criminal complaint. "I bashed her around this house," he said his nephew told him. Kevin said he contacted DCYF at that time, and he also noticed that his nephew subjected Harmony to other forms of abusive discipline, including scrubbing a toilet with her toothbrush and her being spanked hard on the butt. A neighbor said that it was a bad situation at the property, describing lots of people living there at different times, adults seen arguing in the street, junk left piled up in the yard, and the electricity is switched off at one point. The electricity was turned off and they ran the generator all summer with the wiring running through the window. The neighbor said the Montgomerys were basically squatting at the home when it had fallen into foreclosure, and Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery were refusing to leave. "We didn't intermingle with them as it was a bad situation," she said. "There were lots of different people living there, piles of junk in the driveway, junk outside." She said she went away for the Thanksgiving holidays in 2019 and returned to find the family had finally packed up and moved out. And another neighbor on the street where Harmony lived also says that the family moved on Thanksgiving 2019, the same time Adam Montgomery says he last saw the missing child. Manchester police said definitively that Harmony has not been seen since around October or November 2019, when she was 5 years old, yet a missing persons investigation was only launched in December 2021. Mrs. Sori has gone on public record to state that her daughter was failed by everybody. Despite multiple efforts to reach out to her daughter, or at least find out more, no authorities concerned paid attention. And the girl's father clearly couldn't care less what happened to the child. The last confirmed sighting of Harmony by law enforcement was on the 11th of September 2019, when Manchester police officers were called to the home on 77 Guildford Street in Manchester, where she lived. Police Chief Aldenburg, who is in charge of the case now, previously said the last police call-up to the property was in October 2019, but confirmed he had muddled the dates in a press briefing on the 12th of January. Despite the date change, the police chief said investigators are still working on the belief that Harmony was last seen in October or November of that year. Harmony's father and his wife were both arrested and charged on counts related to the missing child in early January. Adam Montgomery was arrested on the 4th of January and charged with second-degree felony assault, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and 1 misdemeanor count of interference with custody. On the assault charge, he is accused of striking Harmony in the face, sometime in July 2019, giving her a black eye according to the criminal complaint. Officials said Montgomery is not cooperating with the investigation into his daughter's disappearance, and he has refused to say where she is. The day after her husband's arrest, Kayla Montgomery was also arrested on 1 felony charge of welfare fraud for allegedly fraudulently collecting welfare benefits for the missing children between December 2019 and June 2021. Mrs. Montgomery, who has 3 children with her husband, is accused of obtaining $1,500 in food stamp benefits meant for Harmony between December 2019 and June 2021, even though the girl was not living with them. Prosecutors have now dropped that welfare fraud charge and added 3 new charges, 1 count of theft by deception and 2 misdemeanor charges of welfare fraud. The charges accuse Mrs. Montgomery of making intentionally false statements about her stepdaughter's whereabouts in February and March 2021 to claim benefits. After the police investigation into the case amped up, several disturbing details about Harmony's father came to light. Adam Montgomery has a history of violence and a long criminal record, including convictions for shooting a man in the head in a drug deal just 6 months before Harmony was born. He was also convicted in 2010 for attacking 2 women at gunpoint. It has emerged that Montgomery is a suspect in the cold case murder of a 28-year-old man in Lynn, New Hampshire, back in February 2008. Darlin Guzman, was found shot in the chest in the parking lot of the former White Hen convenience store in Lynn's Austin Square on the night of the 10th of February 2008. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. A source in Boston law enforcement told reporters that Montgomery, who was 18 at the time, and two members of his family, who were not named, had been the focus of the murder investigation since day one. The three family members had been in contact with the victim earlier that day and planned to meet with him at the convenience store before the meeting culminated in gunfire, according to the source. The victim's car was later found abandoned in the direction of Bedford, New Hampshire, where Montgomery lived at the time. No one has ever been charged with Mr. Guzman's murder, but the source said Montgomery remains the focus of the investigation to this day. Almost 14 years on from that killing, Adam Montgomery and his wife are now charged on counts related to his missing daughter. However, while charged with serious offenses including child abuse and welfare fraud, no charges have been brought against anyone directly in connection to Harmony's disappearance. So why was Harmony not reported missing for 2 years? Mrs. Sori has accused the authorities of failing her daughter. She said she made multiple attempts to report concerns to child services. After November 18th, when she contacted Manchester police saying she believed her daughter was missing, someone finally paid attention. Police officers contacted the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, about the location of the missing child. Then, on the 27th of December, the DCYF reported that it was also unable to locate Harmony. Manchester police announced a search was launched on the 31st of December. Emails sent by Mrs. Sori to the Manchester mayor's office begging for help in finding her daughter have also now come out. "Please, I'm begging for help in finding my daughter," she wrote on the 29th of December. In her emails, Mrs. Sori said Adam Montgomery had never enrolled their daughter in school and that she has missed important doctor's appointments she's had since a baby due to a disability in her eye. The emails were sent just 2 days before police finally reported Harmony missing. As well as the repeated attempts to raise the alarm, the family was well known to child services. Newly released records released on the 12th of January have emerged showing that police officers were called to the Guilford Street home at least 10 times between February 2019, when Montgomery got custody of Harmony, and when she was last seen in the fall. Reports ranged from claims of domestic disturbances to animal welfare and concerns about the living conditions in the home. The DCYF was notified about some of the incidents. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu announced on the 12th of January that the DCYF is carrying out an internal review of its handling of Harmony's case. However, the governor defended the state's work, saying, "As soon as we found out that this child may not have been showing up for school for quite some time, it was reported up to us. The team got right on it. It wasn't a delay. It didn't sit in a file on somebody's desk." An independent investigation is also being carried out by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate after Harmony was moved from Massachusetts into the custody of her father in New Hampshire in February 2019. Now, officials in New Hampshire and Massachusetts are passing the blame between each other. The New Hampshire governor sent a letter to Massachusetts court officials slamming a judge for placing Harmony in the care of her monster father, giving his violent past and long rap sheet. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker responded to the criticism by saying he felt his pain, but said he wants to wait and see the results of the independent review by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. Investigators have revealed very few details about what they think may have happened to Harmony. The Guilford Street property has been the focus of much of the search, with investigators seen in the home and the backyard for multiple days. However, Manchester police said the search had concluded there. It is not clear if anything of interest was uncovered, and no other locations where searches have been identified. Chief Aldenburg insisted on the 12th of January, but they are still working on the belief that Harmony is alive. However, he admitted that he was a little discouraged by the case so far and pleaded with the public to come forward with information. He added, "Somebody out there knows something." Despite the national attention and the painstaking efforts to find the missing child, investigators appear to have made very little headway. Though concerning, The lack of progress is perhaps unsurprising, as whoever has information about what happened to the little girl has had a more than a 2-year head start on the investigators. On the 14th of June 2022, law enforcement officials were seen transporting a refrigerator and taking potential pieces of evidence from the scene at a Manchester home where Harmony Montgomery's father and stepmother, Adam and Kayla, once lived. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffendaffer stated that bringing in the refrigerator is usually used to maintain biological evidence. If they found a body or body parts in a freeze, law enforcement would want to maintain the level of decomposition. Coffendaffer said, "I have a really creepy feeling about this. It's not good." Several law enforcement agencies were seen outside the Union Street apartment complex, where investigators were focused on the second-floor unit, where Montgomery's father, Adam Montgomery, and his now estranged wife, Kayla, once lived. A woman called Darcy Hambleton, who lives behind the apartment complex, told a reporter that she briefly saw police enter the building on Monday, and it seemed casual. But by 9 a.m. Tuesday, Hambleton said she saw a full-scale investigation from her balcony, which included 6 to 7 officers behind the building at any given time. She added that she saw an individual in an FBI t-shirt and one man in a hazmat suit, and noted that the front of the complex is a media circus. Investigators were later seen taking a refrigerator wrapped in biohazard tape from the apartment and loading it into a truck. A camera was also used to search the sewer in front of the building. "I knew about the case since 2021 when Harmony was initially reported missing. It's all over Manchester on signs and billboards," Hambleton said. "But I had no idea that her father had lived behind me." Noting that she has a 7-year-old daughter herself, Hambleton added that her heart is in my stomach right now thinking that something could have happened to that little girl here. After this raid, Crystal Sorey stated publicly, "I know in my heart this is no longer a rescue mission. They're looking for a body." In a disturbing follow-up, Kelsey Small, one-time girlfriend of the father of missing Harmony Montgomery, was recently found dead in Manchester, police said. Small, 27, was with Adam Montgomery when police found the homeless couple sleeping in a car on December 31, 2021, in the early days of the search for Harmony. The cause of death is still pending, but it does not appear suspicious, said police spokeswoman Heather Hamill. According to court records, police were on their 4th day of searching for Harmony when they found Adam Montgomery and Small sleeping in a car on New Year's Eve. The car was parked on Harvell Street on the west side, close to the Gifford Street home where the Montgomery family had lived 2 years earlier. Small told police she had been romantically involved with Adam Montgomery for more than a year. She knew he had 4 children from previous relationships, but he was not in touch with any of them and never talked about Harmony, she told police. She had no idea where Harmony might be. Police eventually arrested Adam Montgomery, but never charged Small with any crime. So what happened to Harmony Montgomery, and where is she now? If her father is innocent, why did he never report her disappearance? And when her mother, Crystal, tried to find her daughter, why weren't police and the local Child Protective Services on her side? As this case unfolds, we hope that Harmony's mother finds the justice she deserves, whether her daughter is dead or living. Police have stated that Harmony is 8, and she should be wearing glasses due to her blindness in one eye. It's a heartbreaking story, and we hope with everything we've got that somehow, against all odds, Harmony Montgomery might still be found alive. A paradise beach turned into a death track for lovers. It is believed that an investigation on the heels of a crime is the most effective and often leads to success. The methodology itself implies immediate response, operational collection of evidence, and questioning of witnesses, which significantly increases the chances of quickly solving the case and holding the guilty accountable. However, if it is not possible to identify the perpetrator, the investigation can drag on for years and even decades until the criminal case is frozen and transferred to the archive after the statute of limitations expires. However, sometimes unsolved and seemingly hopeless investigations receive unexpected developments many years later, which helps to find the right lead and achieve results when no one believed it anymore. The case of Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, which had been gathering dust on the shelves for almost 15 years, is a prime example of this. At the time, it was not possible to solve it despite the operational actions of the investigative team and the high reward offered for any information. The main problem was the lack of motive for such a brutal act against the loving couple. In addition to this, it was not possible to find any witnesses, murder weapons, or any significant clues. It was a typical dead end, and no one hoped that the truth would ever be discovered. However, a decade and a half later, solving this case was helped by another brutal crime. It also turned out that at least 4 people knew what had happened, but all these years, they remained silent. Who were Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen? Lindsay Cutshall was born in the small town of White Eyes, in Coshocton County, Ohio, in 1982. She grew up in a very religious family, and her father was a pastor of a Christian community. Despite a strict upbringing from childhood, she was very active, engaged in sports, and later became interested in hiking and extreme tourism. After finishing school, Lindsay became a student at Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia. During those years, she regularly climbed mountains of various difficulty levels, rafted down turbulent mountain rivers, and even organized hikes herself. The young woman dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them the basics of survival in the wild, rafting, tourism, and so on. Jason Allen was born in the city of Zeeland, in the American state of Michigan, in 1978. He also grew up in a deeply religious family and from a teenage age was seriously interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild. The young man was tall, athletic, toned, possessed leadership qualities, and was able to find like-minded people to conquer new heights. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachians. At that time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. The young people immediately felt mutual sympathy, and just 6 months after their first meeting, the young man came to the girl's parents and asked for their daughter's hand in marriage. Her parents were not opposed and gave their blessing to the lovers. The young man's parents also approved of his choice, after which the couple was officially engaged. Allen presented the young woman with a beautiful diamond ring for this occasion, which was soon to be complemented by another, an engagement ring. The young couple planned to get married in September 2004, had big plans for their future together, and wanted to buy their own large house where they could live comfortably and raise their children. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to come true. The final trip. In the summer of 2004, Lindsay and Jason worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water, located in El Dorado County, California. After their wedding, they planned to open their own similar camp, so they were gaining experience and learning the nuances of working with the younger generation. On the evening of Friday, August 14th of that year, the couple decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues of their plans in advance, leaving 2 of the most experienced counselors in charge of the camp. Lindsay and Jason promised to return by Monday, so their short journey was expected to cause no complications either for the couple or for their temporary replacements. They set off in a 1992 red Ford Tempo, owned by Lindsay, and that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, the counselors had not returned to the camp, but no alarm was raised then, as everyone was confident that the couple would arrive either late at night or early Monday morning. However, when it was discovered after the morning roll call at 8 a.m. that Jason and Lindsay were still missing and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues decided to contact the police and also inform the missing couple's families about the situation. The parents, horrified upon hearing the news, rushed to the camp to learn more about the incident. Everyone knew that the couple was very responsible in their duties. They were never late, and if any unforeseen circumstances had occurred, they would have found a way to communicate that. The challenging search. Upon arrival at the camp, law enforcement officials interviewed the couple's colleagues, and the investigation immediately encountered a serious problem. No one could precisely say where the young couple had gone. It was only known that they planned to explore around San Francisco, and given their great love for adventure and extreme leisure, they could be in the most remote corners where there was neither communication nor civilization. While the police waited the legally mandated 2 days during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends decided not to just sit back, but to organize a search themselves. They called everyone they knew, trying to find out when the couple last made contact with anyone, distributed flyers with photos of the bride and groom, and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation. The main search unfolded around San Francisco, its suburbs and surroundings. However, the area was vast, and it was simply not possible to thoroughly comb through it. Then, one of the friends noted that the couple loved the wild, rocky beaches that were always beautiful and secluded, prompting the police to focus on these areas. Bodies in sleeping bags. For several days, the search yielded no results, and the hope of finding the couple alive was diminishing rapidly. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky, wild beaches reported that 2 bodies were found in sleeping bags on the desolate coast, and it seemed unlikely they were just resting there. The first thing police encountered upon arriving at the scene was a red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point in a small shelter for tourists, from which a steep trail led directly to the scenic wild beach. The car was immediately checked in the database and found to belong to the missing student, Lindsay Cutshall. Descending the trail to the beach, law enforcement found 2 bright sleeping bags containing individuals. At first, it might have seemed they were merely sleeping, but no response came to calls or noise. Approaching closer, the officers saw that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief initial examination suggested that their lives had been taken by gunshot wounds to the head, and given the distinctive smell of decomposition, they had been there for more than a day. All the belongings of the deceased, including mobile phones and wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them. Therefore, a robbery as the main motive was almost immediately ruled out. The keys to the parked car above were also visibly placed, ruling out car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young people who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. Their suspicion was confirmed by documents found nearby under the names Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen, but the bodies still needed to be identified by relatives. The arriving parents of the couple, who had hoped until the last that the remains belonged to someone else, were devastated by grief upon recognizing their children. Investigation and initial theories. Thus, theories involving robbery or an attempted carjacking were dismissed since all valuables, money and keys were left untouched in plain sight. Moreover, forensic analysis revealed no signs of physical assault or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were simply sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and did not have a chance to react. They made no attempt to defend themselves, flee, or even get out of their sleeping bags. Everything pointed to a swift act that resembled an execution or vendetta. But who could have taken the lives of 2 individuals in such a brutal manner, and why? The questions multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs that anyone else had stayed in the area. The beach was quite secluded, and accessing it via the steep trail was challenging. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the heads of the sleeping tourists, indicated by specific traces, so the casings, if not deliberately moved, would have been nearby. Interestingly, the beach appeared quite clean, yet a few meters from where the sleeping bags with the bodies were found, an empty beer bottle lay. The deceased did not drink alcohol as they led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting the bottle might belong to the mysterious shooter. This particular brand of beer was rarely found in the area and likely came from a neighboring state. As no other clues were found, this bottle was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. A theory was proposed that the deceased might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was not excluded that they might have inadvertently displeased someone either in appearance or for some other reason. Additionally, the shooter could have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. From the bullets extracted from the victim's skulls, experts determined they were fired from a Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber, model 1894, produced by Marlin Firearms Company. This was a rare weapon that might have been part of a collector's arsenal. Such models were typically used for hunting. This clue was significant for the ongoing investigation, but it remained the only one for the time being. Investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone. He could have been a hunter, collector, or firearm enthusiast. The couple's route, search, and witness interviews. The investigation now aimed to establish the route the couple had taken, who they might have contacted, and when they were last seen alive. The first task presented few issues, as the couple had taken numerous photos, and their camera remained untouched among their personal belongings. Additionally, in the tourist cabin near the lookout point where they parked their car, there was a guest book where visitors could leave notes. The engaged couple had written a couple of entries expressing that it was one of the best weekends of their lives, filled with love, happiness, and the discovery of perhaps the most beautiful beach they had ever seen. It was discovered that on Saturday the couple had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles from where their lives were ultimately taken. This was evidenced by the photographs they had taken there, prompting law enforcement to visit the area and speak with locals in search of potential witnesses. Many remembered the young couple traveling in a red car. They were looking for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in any of the 3 nearby hotels. This was because August is peak tourist season in the area, and most travelers booked their accommodations well in advance. The couple then dined at a local restaurant, walked around the area, took several photos, and set off again in the evening. According to everyone who saw and interacted with them, they were friendly, engaged in no conflicts, and appeared happy and carefree. None of the witnesses could recall anything suspicious or unusual. Notably, the beach where the bodies were found was located in a protected area where camping was prohibited. However, since the young people could not find a place to stay overnight, they decided to settle on the beach, but chose not to set up a tent, instead using their sleeping bags. They believed that on a warm August night on a secluded beach, they faced no threats, and planned to head back at dawn to return to the Rock and Water camp on Sunday as promised. This information helped narrow down the time frame during which the couple was likely taken from life. They went to sleep but did not survive until morning, indicating they were likely taken from life between 11 o'clock Saturday night and dawn on Sunday. The first suspect. Although the investigation into the double taking of life was in full swing and news broadcasts urged anyone with any relevant information to contact the police, law enforcement withheld certain details. In particular, the results of the ballistics analysis were kept secret to avoid alerting the suspect and prompting them to hastily dispose of the weapon used in the crime. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who periodically slept on that very beach and had been seen nearby on the evening before the crime. The homeless man, mentioned by some witnesses, was quickly located, brought to the station, and interrogated. The 57-year-old suspect had no alibi for the night of the crime. However, his involvement could not be confirmed. The main reasons were the absence of the weapon used in the crime and the fact that his DNA did not match that found on the beer bottle discovered on the beach. A new phase of the investigation in 2006. For nearly 2 years, the investigation had been at a standstill, with no clear direction on how to proceed. Then, in the spring of 2006, law enforcement decided to publicize the data they had on the weapon used in the crime, and to reach out again to potential witnesses by offering a $50,000 reward for any useful information that could lead to the perpetrator. Following this announcement, about 1,000 calls came in, but most did not aid the advancement of the investigation. However, law enforcement became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, pointed out by several locals. According to them, the young man collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Sean was arrested and questioned. He had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them.
Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallen had to be released. A suspect from another country? Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter came under scrutiny, often seen with a firearm, frightening the local residents. His name was Joseph Henry Burgess, and he was 61 years old at the time of the couple's demise. Burgess often ranted about receiving commands from God. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Joseph lived in Canada, where he also wandered aimlessly. In 1978, he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person, and according to those around him, he was quite the fanatic. He soon had a conflict with 2 young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished. His guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues, but he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally. He managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century until the police connected him with the double homicide on a beach in California. However, they were unable to interrogate him as a shootout occurred during his apprehension, resulting in the deaths of a police sergeant and Burgess himself who opened fire. A fatal echo from the past. In the spring of 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th. Gunshots rang out in the Gallen family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallen, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings, during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. Police recognized the shooter's name as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in the double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been in police sites twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement then decided to thoroughly reinvestigate this man's potential involvement in a couple's perpetration from 13 years prior. His personal social media page revealed much, where he posted pictures of his substantial weapon collection and discussed supposed telepathic and extrasensory abilities. According to his posts, he believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space. This seemed like delusions of a disturbed mind, and police suspected Sean indeed had serious mental disorders. He stubbornly refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and insisted on his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's page, they found something intriguing. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had messaged Seamus, suggesting she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew everything but kept silent. Unfortunately, questioning either was no longer possible since the brother had been shot, and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. An unexpected confession. Initially, Sean denied any involvement and refused to speak, but when shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account. His narrative not only surprised, but shocked law enforcement. Despite more than 13 years passing since the double homicide, Gallen remembered the details of that night vividly. That evening, he had left his house with a Marlin rifle, intending to hunt in a wooded area. He aimlessly wandered for a couple of hours before descending a trail to a wild beach, which, he claimed, was a spot to encounter boars. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags. Approaching closer, he discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes, then suddenly heard voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. He decided to collect the casings and carried them away in a beer can he had emptied while descending to the beach. Later, according to him, he tossed the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he went to give the rifle to his father and asked him to hide it. His elderly father asked no questions and simply buried the weapon in the dirt floor of the cellar in his old barn. Remarkably, Sean's claims were verified. The rifle was found at the site of the now collapsed barn, and the beer can with the casing still rested in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The fact that the murderer's father had passed away in 2009 and his property had since fallen into disrepair and abandonment helped preserve these items. It turned out that the bottle found on the beach had no connection to the crime and was mistakenly considered as evidence. Forensic psychiatric evaluation, Sean Gowan blamed the voices in his head, which he claimed ordered him to commit acts of violence, and asserted that he was not aware of his actions. His defense attorneys also insisted that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. It was up to qualified psychiatrists to determine the truth of these claims. The evaluation revealed that the accused did indeed suffer from a range of mental disorders, exacerbated by the effects of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, at the time of the crime, he acted deliberately, carefully planning each step. Sean was fully aware of how to proceed and how to cover his tracks to avoid police detection. This was precisely why he first ended the life of the young man, knowing that if anything went awry, the woman would not be able to resist. For the same reason, he took the casings with him and prudently gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. According to the psychiatrists, although Gowan had mental deviations, he was competent to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. What was surprising in this complex case was that his parents, brother, and former girlfriend knew, or at least suspected, that he had committed the double homicide, yet none of them had turned him over to the police. Trial and sentence. The trial of the accused took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the brutal act against the couple. On June 17th of that year, Sean Gowan was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 94 years for the end of his own brother's life in 2017. The convicted man is now serving his sentence in a special prison unit designated for particularly dangerous inmates with mental disorders. He continues to claim that he hears voices and behaves aggressively. Hence, he is kept under special surveillance to prevent him from harming himself or anyone else nearby. Lastly, it should be noted that the motive for the double homicide was never established. Sean simply saw the couple sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives.